Hey, what is up guys? My name is Oleg, this is Bond. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm gonna share with you my 7 tips on how to buy vintage watches on eBay like a pro. Now these tips apply to all kinds of watches. They don't have to be vintage watches specifically. So just apply the tips that apply to vintage watches, and if you're buying not a vintage watch, then of course skip that tip. Makes sense? Alright. Now before we get started, I want to mention one thing. Today, or around the time this video is posted, the channel is turning 1 year old. I am really excited and really thankful to all of you guys. I'm very proud of the community that we have built, and I'm gonna continue uploading more videos, and I'm gonna continue providing great content, and I do appreciate all of your support. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get started with today's video. Step number 0 is obviously to figure out what kind of watch you want to buy. Now I'm gonna assume you already know in your mind which one of the watches you're buying. If you don't know, maybe you found a random watch online. Doesn't really matter. The point is that you already have a specific watch in mind that we're gonna research and we're gonna buy. For this example, I'm just gonna use a vintage Seiko GMT, a really cool navigator watch. And it's just going to be a watch that we use. But obviously these tips apply to all kinds of watches. Doesn't have to be specifically Seikos. It doesn't have to be specifically vintage watches. All right, so step number 1 is to research sold prices. What you want to do is not only find out how much these watches are listed for when you search the name on eBay, but you also want to find out how much these watches are selling for. So how do you find the sold prices for watches? Well, it's actually very easy. So first of all, obviously search the name of the watch that you're researching. Then on the left hand side here, we're gonna scroll down until we see show only as a category, and we're gonna select sold items. When we select sold items, it's also gonna select completed items, and here we have by the date all the watches that have been sold. So we can see let's say this one right here sold $177.50 from United States with 15 offers. All right, let's check it out, because what we're looking for here is just trying to see how reliable was the seller, was it a good deal, and trying to imagine almost if you were in the shoes of the buyer that purchased this watch, would you have pulled the trigger and bought the watch? Looks pretty good here. The seller has pretty good feedback, and the shipping seems reasonable. 15 offers. Yeah, looks pretty good. The description is a bit vague. I would probably contact the seller and ask them some questions, but of course we're gonna get to that step. All right, maybe let's select one more here. All right, just as a variety, of course, let's look at this one here that sold on October 20th at $255. So we can see quite a jump between 177 and 255. All right, so let's see this watch here, also sold from United States. Now I should mention that I'm not endorsing any one of the sellers. I'm just doing a random research as you would if you were at home. So I'm not endorsing or putting down, so to speak, any of the sellers. This is all just at random. So again, seems like the seller has a pretty good feedback, 100%. It has a nice rating and quite a bit of description, so that's pretty good. So this seller sells quite a few watches, you can tell, but it does say sold as is, which is something to watch out for. A lot of sellers put that in to protect themselves. All right, so we should again do this step over and over until we figure out what is the price that we are willing to pay. So it seems like this one here, 275, 230, this one 150. That's a great price, 250. So it seems like they're going somewhere around 230. The lowest one was 150 or 177. So somewhere around that price. 250, 230, 200 is where you want to stay to buy a good watch at a reasonable price. Now, of course, with vintage watches, condition is everything. The devil is in the details, so to speak. So you can't compare apples to apples. There is going to be a price discrepancy, but with this step, basically what you want to figure out is what is the fair price to pay for the watch. Step number 2, check seller's rating and feedback. So now we figured out what is the fair price that we are willing to pay for a watch, or what is the maximum price we're willing to pay for a watch in a certain condition, and now we're gonna figure out which seller to buy from. So jumping back to the computer here, we see this one is actually expiring in 7 minutes or so. So let's click on the first one. Now, right away, country of origin is Colombia. So that's a bit worrisome because, of course, buying from countries like Colombia, like Venezuela, like Philippines, nothing against the countries, of course, I don't mean to sound racist, but it's very hard to track your money down in case something goes wrong with the watch. So you can see they're using caliper here. Of course, you want to inspect all the pictures, but this step is really all about checking the seller. So we're going to click on the seller's profile. All right, we can see that they have 44 positive feedback, 0 negative. Let's see positive feedback. So we're going to click on that and really see, okay. So they sold vintage Omega Speedmaster Lynx. So that's not a watch. They sold this vintage Hamilton Aqua Diver. We can also even look at the item itself. All right, so the seller has pretty good ratings, but to be honest, this would be a bit of a risk here. Based in Colombia part is a bit worrisome. You can also see what they're selling. So it looks like they're selling a Tudor here, a Zodiac watch, Tag Heuer. So they have quite a few watches that they're selling. So it looks like they're focusing on watches, and the current bid is at $200 US. So maybe bid, maybe not, kind of a risk. The condition of the watch looks pretty good actually. So that's really kind of a risky one. All right, so what do we have here? We have another one, and this one is in United States. The seller doesn't have that huge of a rating. It does have a 100% positive feedback. Let's scroll down to the description. All right, so there's quite a bit of description here, which is always good to see. Seems like this person knows about watches, or at least did their research about watches. So that's always nice to see. Again, what we're really focusing here is the seller's feedback and the seller's reviews. So 100% positive feedback, which is good to see. Click on that once again, and we can see again, this seller actually joined in 2002, so it's a long-term seller. They have all positive feedbacks for the year. We want to see the last month or so, and again, pretty good feedback here. So that tells us that this is a pretty good seller. I would buy this watch from the seller. Again, I need to inspect the watch in more detail, but once again, it looks like they are selling quite a few watches. So this doesn't look like that big of a risk, less of a risk, so to speak, than buying from a Colombian one. However, the watch from Colombia has a $200 bid right now, versus this one is starting at $278. So that's kind of already closer to the top of our budget. When you buy vintage watches, you really want to make sure you buy from somebody who has 98 plus feedback. So 98.4 is okay, but I really prefer 98, 99, 100 of course is ideal, like this seller here. So this one is from United Kingdom, 100% positive feedback. The watch looks to be in a pretty good condition, and we can click on the seller and again just look through their feedback. So there's 2 neutral and 297 positive. So let's click on neutral and let's see what's going on. Okay, so the strap was fake, the watch was genuine, and this was during the past year, and also not working properly, tune less than time, but thank you for the discount. So I guess they worked out some kind of deal to satisfy this buyer. Nevertheless, the buyer still left a neutral review, so it's not necessarily a negative. So yeah, not a bad seller here again. Seems like they've been a long-term seller since 2014. So yeah, I wouldn't be too risky to buy from this seller. However, the price is up there. So the step number 2 is basically just going through each one of the sellers that you're interested in their watches and looking at their reviews, looking at their feedback. And again, my recommendation is having somebody who has 98 and over. If it's anything under 98, especially with vintage watches, I would not be buying from this seller. That's just my personal preference. You can take more risks if you want. Tip number 3, ask a lot of questions and inspect pictures closely. Let's jump back to our eBay page here. All right, so let's select this seller here. We haven't looked at this one yet. All right, so first from step number 2, you can already see that the ratings that the seller has is kind of low. The feedback score is only 60, so they're not selling too many items on eBay. A bit worrisome, not a big deal, but I would prefer to buy from one of the other sellers that we've looked at because they have more feedback. So let's go back to the seller here. I believe this is the one that has, oh, this is the 100%. Okay, so what we really want to do is look at the pictures in detail. We can see a bit of scratches on that acrylic crystal, maybe some discoloration there by 4. Yeah, you see the GMT bezel is kind of faded there by 4, by 2. It's not as clear and not as bright as the rest of the bezel. Let's maybe look at a different picture. Yeah, definitely faded there. Also, let's look from the side. These are not, these are pretty good pictures, but I wish there were a little bit more close-ups. So yeah, just inspecting the case basically and seeing what we can see. Oh, actually, you know what? Never mind. So that discoloration or the fading of the bezel was just the way the watch looked from that angle, but obviously looking from a different angle, you can see that it doesn't have the discoloration. And here's a look at the movement. Yeah, looks pretty good, looks clean. Of course, these vintage movements all look kind of similar to this, but doesn't look like it has too much dirt or anything like that. So yeah, the case looks to be in a pretty good condition, nothing that really jumps out at me. And now we want to scroll down and read the description. And if you have any more questions, if you want to have any additional information about the watch, of course, just ask the seller. And here's the button, contact seller, and you can write a message and ask whatever questions you want to ask. Tip number 4, don't bid on a watch until last minutes of the auction. A lot of people see a watch that they like and it has 2 or 3 days left until the end of the auction. The bid is at $90, so they put $95 or $100 or whatever it is. In my opinion, that's a mistake. You really don't want to drive the price up until the last few minutes of the auction. So what do I mean by that? Let's jump back to the computer. So this item right here, this Seiko, coming back to this, the same seller here, looks like they have 2 days and 23 hours left on this auction and 26 people watch it. So what that basically means is that about a couple hours before the auction ends, people will start bidding on this watch. So at the moment, everybody is just waiting. They're waiting until the last few minutes to make a bid. The way I usually make my bids is might be different from your strategy, but the way I do it, about 5 minutes before the auction ends, I really tune in and really keep track of everyone who made a bid and who would be the person that's likely to bid the most. Then about a minute before the auction is done, I type in my bid. I don't hit submit bid yet. About 30 seconds before the auction ends, I hit submit bid, and about I'd say 10 seconds before the auction ends, I press confirm bid, because that's what you have to do. You have to confirm the bid before you place the bid. So that's important to keep in mind. Don't type in your bid 10 seconds before the auction ends, because by the time you confirm the bid, the auction is going to be over and you're going to lose the item. Also, eBay will give you a chance to add another bid if somebody placed a higher bid than you. So just keep that in mind. And maybe I'll make another separate video about my bidding strategies on eBay, because that's a subject in itself. But from this video, the main takeaway is don't bid too early. Wait until literally last few seconds of the auction before you submit your bid. Tip number 5, make reasonable offers. So in tip number 4, we talked about bidding or auction situations. In this situation, some sellers will allow you to make a best offer to them, and they will consider either accept it or decline it. And this is actually my preferred method of buying vintage watches. So let's jump back to the computer here. We can see that this seller here is accepting offers. So it says 485 or best offer. Again, what I would do, check the seller's feedback, check the seller's rating, read the description, inspect the pictures closely, do all of that stuff, of course, and ask any questions. So go through all the steps, and now I would put an offer. So make an offer, and I will submit my offer. From my experience, don't lowball sellers, because it creates a bit of a wall or hostility between you and the seller. And myself, as somebody who sold a few watches on eBay, I can relate to the seller. If you get a offer for 50% of your asking price, or just really unreasonably low offer, you don't really want to deal with this buyer. So I would figure out the price you want to pay from step number one, and then make an offer around that price, and maybe a little bit of negotiation back and forth. And I believe you can make 4 or 5 offers in total until you can no longer make offers. So don't be afraid to make offers that you want to make, but also don't lowball, because that's just going to ruin your chances of getting the item. So the first 5 tips were about how to buy a vintage watch on eBay. Now that we actually bought one, so we went through all the steps, we checked all the proper things that we needed to check, we're confident, we bought the watch. Now the last 2 steps are about what you do when you actually receive the watch. So tip number 6 is to take pictures of your unboxing experience. You don't necessarily have to make an unboxing video like you see some of the videos on this channel, but do take pictures of the package when it arrives, when you open the package, because you want to have some proof just in case something goes wrong and you want to claim your money back through eBay. You have some proof of how the watch arrived when you initially received it. And tip number 7, take the watch to your watchmaker as soon as possible. So that doesn't mean you take it next week or in 3 days time. If it's possible, take it the same day or the next day. You want to get on it as soon as possible, because if you buy a bad watch, or if you buy a Franken watch or a watch with a fake movement, or something is kind of bothering you about the watch, and the seller, chances are, already knows that they sold you a fake watch, they will try to take the money out of their PayPal account as soon as possible, and it would be very difficult to retrieve your money. So what you want to do, you want to check the watch as soon as possible. You want to get on it as soon as possible. Bring it to your watchmaker, maybe service it if the watch needs servicing, but the main thing is to check it over, make sure that everything there works and everything is in order. If it is, fantastic. If it's not, you want to open the claim with the seller through eBay as soon as possible. All right, guys, so those were my seven tips on how to buy vintage watches on eBay like a pro. Now, I'm sure I missed some of the tips, so if you noticed any of the tips missing, or if you have some personal tips and tricks to share with us, please do so in a comment section, and hopefully that will help the community overall, and we can have some good discussions going. I appreciate you watching this video until the end. I know it was a long one, but you stuck with it, so thank you. By the way, today on my wrist, I'm wearing my vintage 1970s racing chronograph by a company named Chateau. I bought this one a few months ago. The unboxing video is on the channel, and I followed these 7 tips in buying this watch, and it worked out for me really well. The review is coming soon. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss that video. Also in the description, there is a secret link. Check it out. I think you'll like this one. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.